Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Executive Editor of Farm Equipment. Welcome to our latest webinar in conjunction with the Western Equipment Dealers Association and the Dealer Institute. Today, we're going to discuss productivity and efficiency in the service department. Today's presenter is Kelly Matheson, a trainer and consultant with WEDA's Dealer Institute. Before Kelly gets started with his presentation, just a few housekeeping items. On your screen, there's a control panel, and in that panel, there's a Q&A function and a chat function. If you have questions at any point through the presentation, go ahead and submit a question using that Q&A box. And then Kelly's also going to ask to get some feedback from you guys during his presentation with what you think an answer to something might be. In those instances, go ahead and use that chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on both the chat and the Q&A, so I'll see what you send through when it comes. And if for any reason it seems like the webinar got disconnected, just go back to the email that you got telling you how to join, and you can get back in that way. All right, that's all I had. So thanks again for joining us and take it away, Kelly.
Thanks very much, Kim. And thanks everyone for signing in and taking advantage of this program today. And thanks to Farm Equipment Magazine for all you do for our industry and hosting these webinars. We get lots of feedback on it. And of course, thanks to Western Equipment Dealers Association for co-sponsoring. So like Kim said, we're going to ask you to give us some answers. So if you've got your calculator, maybe you've got your smartphone in front of you, turn it to the calculator mode, and we'll have a little bit of fun with this. Also, just take some notes. If you've got a pen and notepad, write it down. And as even if you don't want to type it in into the chat, write it on a piece of paper. And then as we do the answers, you may surprise yourself. So it's very handy. So make sure you're asking questions. And again, as Kim mentioned, there'll be questions at the end. So if you can refer back to a specific slide that you may have a question on, make sure you just type that in, and we'll go through that at the end. So we're going to talk today about productivity and efficiency, and really like a lot of key financial metrics or KPIs, key performance indicators, a lot of dealerships and manufacturers use a lot of these key metrics. They share them with their staff, the manufacturers share it with their dealer groups, and it could be anything from customer satisfaction ratings, maybe it's your parts turn or new inventory turn, used inventory turn. And in the shop, quite often productivity and efficiency are two of the big metrics that they want to watch from a service management and technician efficiency basis. And of course, things like WIP, work in process. Some dealerships will share what their total sales or maybe what their year-to-year results increase or decrease over last year or last quarter. But a lot of dealerships, some share everything, right down to all the cash flow needs and net profit, and many do not. And so when I look at this, quite often employees don't understand how the decisions they make have an influence on the profitability, cash flow, or long success of the business. And I read a book called Get in the Game, and they use a great example. If you can't see everything, it's kind of like going bowling when you can't see the pins. You know, your boss tells you to come in and do a certain job every day, and you're just like you're throwing balls down the alley, but you can't see how many pins you're knocking over if you can't see what the net result is. And you think about how difficult that would be, and then how much easier it would be if all of a sudden they said, oh, we're going to lift that curtain up, and now you can see the pins, you can see the bottom line. So that's what we're going to cover this. And because of that, many employees don't understand what levers to pull to improve results. They might see a certain metric, but they're not quite sure how to make it better. So we're going to cover a few things and have a little bit of fun with this today. So we're going to talk about basic financial literacy. So here's your first question. In your chat, I'd like you to just type this down, or just type in this number. Or if you're not able to type it in, write it on a notepad, and we'll just see how close you come. So how much profit does the organization make? So your dealership, out of every dollar that they sell worth of parts, service, equipment, how many cents goes to the bottom line or to net profit? So just write that number down or type it in. Now, maybe you're a department manager, and I want you to type in how much you think your department makes, your service department. I'm talking net profit. So after all the bills are paid, how much goes in there? So I'm getting some answers in. Some are saying 0.3 to 0.6. I'm assuming that's percent. Some are saying 6, 7. Some are saying 20%. Some are saying 10%. So there's some good answers coming in. 5 to 7 cents on the dollar. Some are saying 25 cents, 9 cents. So we got some great answers. So thank you, everybody. So when I do this in the classroom, this is the answers I get: 30, 40%, 5 cents, 2 cents. So it's all over the map. And this kind of goes back again to the next question is, what are your monthly cash flow requirements? And so judging by the answers that are coming in, this is a great line from a Great Game of Business. The author, the book is called Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. And in there, he has a line that says, if people don't know, they'll make it up, and they'll probably be wrong. And based on the answers that are coming in, I can see that, yeah, we're all over the map. Okay, 20, 30 cents, 2 cents, 5 cents, we're all over the place. Okay, so of course we do a cost of doing business survey through our dealer association. Every year we ask dealers to send in their information, and I'm just going to share this percent of net income. So here's what the average dealership is all over North America. We ask them to send in their numbers. We break them down by location. So this is average dealership per store. And as you can see, this is where it is. 2.3%, 1.3% back in 2017. We are under a cent of every dollar that we sold actually got to the bottom line. Last year, meaning now these numbers are 1 year old. So actually 2019 numbers are really 2018 results. And I can just imagine what next year's results are probably not going to be this rosy. But if you look at this, these are the profit dollars that are coming in. And these are the percentage as a percent of revenue over here. And you can see, now some of you might think, boy, that's a lot of money, you know, $335,000. You look back in 2017, $77,000 after all the stuff we do in a dealership isn't very much left. It's pretty thin ice, as we say. So kind of interesting. Now here's another myth. How many have heard this, maybe from a technician or from a customer, or maybe from another staff member, when they talk about the shop, say, oh, the dealership's making tons of money. They pay me $30 an hour, and they charge me out at 120. Somebody's typed in here every week. And yes, when I was at the dealership, I heard this all the time. You charge way too much. I know you're not paying that technician that much. So we're going to take a look at that one and just see how you might answer that question, or at least figure out what's going on. The next thing we're going to talk about is a lot of dealership staff, whether it's a technician, service administrator, service manager. You ask them, the decisions I make, they don't have any impact on the bottom line. I'm a very small cog in this wheel. You know, if I miss $5 on a work order, it's really not that important in this big dealership. So we're going to show some examples of actually some impact it does have. Okay. And in some places, when we do our classes, some of the technicians or administrators, they'll say, well, really worrying about the bottom line is not my job. That's the manager's job. I don't have any impact. I just do my work. Okay. So we're going to kind of raise the curtain, so to speak, on this bowling alley, and we're going to kind of show how this works. Okay, so now we're going to specifically hone in on the aftermarket department and the impact, and today specifically the service department. Okay. So I always ask this question when we're in our class. Your company's success is dependent on two critical elements. Now, from this perspective, we're talking about financial performance. So yes, customer satisfaction is important, employee satisfaction is important, customer service is important, but there's two main things that if you don't get right, your business will collapse. And number one is cash flow. You need to generate cash. Everyone listening in on this webinar is expecting something every 2 weeks, right? It's called a paycheck, and that takes cash, okay? And the dealership has lots of obligations. Sometimes it's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month that cash has to flow out to pay the bills and pay the staff and make payroll. The next one is generating a net profit. we must make some money. It's not a dirty word, profitability, and we need to make some money. Now, we might have a few months where maybe even a year or so, where we go into the red, it's not profitable, and we have to borrow to get out of it. But the bottom line is, sooner or later, we have to generate a profit, or else our business collapses. So we're just going to talk really quickly here about just understanding basic financials. So whether you're a department manager, whether you're running a whole dealership or a small business, this is a basic framework skeleton of a financial statement. You may call it a P&L statement, or an income statement, or whether it's departmental or by your dealership. So generally there's your revenue, that's your top line. So that's everything you sell. So in a dealership, that's everything you sell in the shop. It's everything you sell as far as service items or trucking, all that sort of thing that goes on in your shop. Then you have your cost of sales. So what does it cost? So in a parts department, for example, what you sell for parts is the revenue. The cost of sales, what you paid for that part. Okay, you subtract those and it gives you gross margin dollars. What do we do with gross margin dollars? We pay the bills. Okay, so there's all the expenses to keep the dealership afloat or the department afloat. After that's subtracted off, you have your net profit dollars. So that's what we were asking in that question when you're saying, oh, I think 20 cents or 30 cents or 10 cents drives to the bottom line. That's what we're talking about, is net profit. Now, these are shown normally in dollars and then also as a percentage. And just like my graph said a few minutes ago, you've got a percentage on one side so you can see a trend, but the dollars are what you have to pay the bills or reinvest back in the company. So dollars pay the bills, the percentages are used for analysis, okay? So now, we don't have time for this today, but in a dealership, I want you just to ask, anybody want to write down, out of every dollar worth of revenue that you sell in your service department, how many cents goes to the bottom line? So after you sell service, pay the technicians, maybe you're doing trucking and you pay for the cost of the truck, how many cents gets to the bottom line in the average dealership in North America? Jot that in. Some are saying 50%, some are saying 33, 20 plus. 15, I think that's getting a little closer. So most dealerships that we work with, obviously there's a range. I know lots of dealerships that barely break even in their service shops, and some are, higher than 10 or 12%. There's the answer just came in, 10 or 12%. That's pretty close. But a lot of dealerships hover somewhere between 5 and 10%. That's the high performance dealers are above 10, but a lot of them hover. So for our example today, I'm going to use a dealership, a real dealership, and they were making 8%. So after they had a net income of 8% of their total service sales. So you can compare this with your own dealership after the webinar. So assuming, now here's where I'm going to ask you to write this down and I'll show you how to do this. So this is really around, do the decisions I make have an impact? Okay, so this is technicians. All right, so assuming your service department had a net income of 8% of total service sales, how much do you need to recover the loss of, let's use that $5. So $5, you missed it on a work order. Maybe you're a service manager, a service administrator. You just didn't get it jotted down. Oh, well, big deal. We didn't make that $5. So how much do you have to sell to get that back? Somebody says $62.50, right? Anybody else got a guess? Actually, the answer is $62.50. Good on you there, Jason. You must have been in my class before, or you've seen this example. The answer is $62.50. If $5 gets missed on a work order, that would have gone into revenue, but because it didn't, it isn't in there. So you have to go out and sell another $62.50 to make that $5 back. Has a big impact, okay? Now here's the example. Kim and Rachel and I, before we started today, I asked this question. Let's say you've got a nice broom, for sweeping the shop floor, and one of the employees or yourself maybe leave it laying on the floor and somebody comes along with a forklift and runs over it. Okay, and it's ruined. So we got to go buy another broom. How much more do we need to sell? Okay, Now somebody's typed in $400, right on the money. So for some of you that are saying, well, how do they come up with this answer? What you do is you take what I call the controllable expense, okay? So say you can use this in your own dealership, take the controllable expense and divide it by whatever your net income percent is. So if you take $32, divide it by 8%, you'll have your answer, okay? So let's do a couple more. Maybe you write off $100 on a work order, take that $100, divide it by 8%, $1,250. So when we make a decision to write $100 off a work order, we got to go out and sell another $1,250. Maybe we should consider, why are we writing that $100 off? Maybe we don't have to write it all off. And here's a real example the dealership gave me. Was a hood on a tractor. They had removed the hood on a tractor, and the technician got in a hurry, didn't use the proper procedures. It fell down, it got smashed, scraped up. They had to replace it. $2,000, right? Now, yes, the technician felt bad, but you put that into dollars and cents. How much do you need to now sell to get that $2,000 back? The answer is $25,000. That's could be 2-3 inspections, maybe a whole combine inspection just to pay for that bit of carelessness. So the answer to the question, do the decisions you make, your service administrators, your technicians, your shop foremen, do they have an impact on the business? The answer, you bet, okay? So that might be interesting for some of you. And it looks like some of you are getting the answers in, so great work. All right. So we're going to move on. So now we're going to move into productivity and efficiency. So if you really, if we look at this, we're going to look at labor as an inventory item, okay? So your primary service commodity that you sell in your dealership or in your service shop is labor sales, okay? And the question is, what's its shelf life? Okay, so what is the shelf life? Okay, so let's take it as an inventory. Say you're a parts manager, you buy a part for $30 at 8 o'clock in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, you haven't sold that part. It's still on your shelf, okay? But if you take a look at a technician, and of course I'm from Canada, so I'm going to use Canadian dollars here. Let's just say a technician, a top technician, you're paying them $30 an hour, and at 8 o'clock, and you don't sell that hour till 9 o'clock. Is it still on the shelf? The answer is no. If you don't sell it, it's gone. And it's not by the hour, it's every minute. Every minute that doesn't get sold is lost. Now you put that to a parts manager, he's going to say, that's crazy. How can you buy inventory and just throw it out? You can't lose it. Yeah, well, we do it all the time in the shop. And so, and some of it's unavoidable. So let's have a look. Let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So we use this same number. Some of you may have seen this before. So I'm just going to use some real simple, again, basic math. You can follow along. So we've got a technician, 40 hours a week. Okay, we're not going to talk about overtime. There's 52 weeks in a year. So we've paid them for 2,080 hours. Okay. They also get 2 weeks vacation. Okay. Maybe they have statutory holidays, another 7.5 days. So there's another 60 hours that they're paid for, but they're not at work, okay? Maybe you have other paid time off or sick days. Okay, there's another week, another 40 hours gone. So when you think about your inventory, you've paid for 2,080 hours, but the technician is only there for 1,900 of those hours, okay? So already you've lost, 10, 15% of that inventory is gone, okay? Now, the next thing is now that they're at work, of course, you've got things like training, breaks, delays, all the sort of things that go on in a dealership. You're not going to be able to have them on revenue jobs for all 1,900 hours. So this is where productivity comes from. Now, we're going to use a target or an industry sort of guideline of 85%. So out of those 1,900 hours that the technician's actually available, 85% of those is a good target to have them on revenue jobs, okay? So is that realistic to have them on revenue jobs, okay? Now, we're gonna get into this a little bit deeper on efficiency. Once you have them on a revenue job, is every hour that they spend on a revenue job actually billed out. Okay, so that's how we're going to get to efficiency. Okay. So now let's take a look at 1 hour. So we've got a technician at work. They show up 8 o'clock. Okay, we've got them at work, and for our dealership example, let's say our retail door rate is $120 an hour. Okay, we're paying the technician $30. So this is going back to our structure. So $120 is the sale of that hour. We've paid the technician $30. This is where technicians say, see, you're making tons of money. You're making $90 off my back. Well, fair enough. Okay, let's go a little deeper. I went over to our accounting department. I said, what's it cost to run this shop every hour? What's the total cost? Pay the heat, the light, the taxes, the tools, the overhead, all the things that are involved besides the wages just to keep these doors open. And in this dealership, $55 for every single hour that we're open. That's what it costs to keep the lights on. So how much money are we really making? $35. Still sounds pretty good. But what's the assumption? The assumption is that we're selling every single hour that technician's there. So to get a real effective labor rate, you take a look at, this is at 100% productivity, but if you look at 85% productivity, now how do we calculate that? You take 85% of $35? Actually, the answer is no. You take 85% of 120, okay? So 85% of 120. Now all of a sudden, our real effective labor rate is really only $102 an hour. Now, technician still wants to be paid the same amount, so that cost didn't change. $30 is your cost of sale. Your expenses didn't change. So now, even at 85% productivity, there's only $17 going to the bottom line. Okay. Now, some will say, boy, 85 is pretty aggressive. You know, we certainly don't hit that in our shop. Well, let's have a look at it at 75% productivity. Same thing. You look at it here, now we're down to $5. So the ice is, again, as we say, is getting pretty thin here. There's not a lot of money actually being made. There's lots of gross margin dollars coming in, but we got to pay those bills, and there's not much room for a mistake. So this is why productivity is so important. Actually, somebody said $55 expenses per tech. No, I'll answer that question right now. Those expenses per hour are what it costs. So you could go over to your accounting department and say, what's it cost for heat, light, rent, taxes, you know, the overhead, shop tools, anything that's going into that shop to keep it afloat. Okay, the real expenses of the dealership. And then I just took those expenses for the year, divided it by however many hours we're open. Okay, so that's how we use that to answer that. Hopefully that answers that question. So the shop expenses are what it costs to keep the doors of your shop open, not the whole dealership, just the shop. Okay. So let's get into productivity and efficiency. So the generic productivity, a generic definition is billed hours divided by worked hours. So when I say worked hours, those are available hours that the technician is actually at work. So in our example, it's not 2,080, it's that 1,900 hours that they're already there. Okay. So in our dealership, let's say we paid 10,500 hours, but because of vacations and sick and paid time off, we actually have 10,100 hours that the technicians are there. And at the end of the year, we had actually 8,400 hours onto revenue jobs. Now, I'm going to clarify, revenue jobs are customer work, internal work like setup, pre-delivery, or warranty. Those are your three main types of revenue work. Sweeping the shop floor is non-revenue. Okay, so doing standing around, anything that's what we call lost time. So in our dealership here, we had our technicians for 10,100, but 8,400 of those hours were actually posted to revenue jobs. So you divide those two, and we have 83.1. So we're doing not bad in our dealership. Okay, so you've got your we're sitting at 83.1%. So you say, well, our target's 85. We have work to do. but we're not bad. So there's how you could do it in your dealership. Now, if you're the older John Deere dealerships used to call it revenue recovery factor, or RRF. The only thing is that you got to remember sometimes these hours that are posted to revenue jobs aren't closed yet. Okay, so if you're running this number, you may go back and say, well, I've got open work orders and I've got 100 hours billed to that, posted to that job. Well, that's true, right? Now, are all 100 hours going to get billed? I don't know, but that's one caveat I want to put on here. Now let's look at efficiency. Now efficiency is billed hours plus gains or losses and divided that by the revenue hours. So in our example, we had our technicians were on revenue jobs for 8,400 hours, okay? But we were able to bill 8,750. Now, how could we do that? Well, if you're quoting 2 hours to do a job and the technician's really efficient and they do it in an hour and a half, you're gonna pick up what we call a billing gain, okay? So there's a billing gain. So we go back to our dealership, 8,400 hours posted to jobs, we were able to bill 8,750. So you divide those two and we have an efficiency of 104%. Again, a great target is 100% or greater, okay? That's where we wanna be. Now, some of you might call it charge out efficiency, but the big thing here, it does include billing gains or losses. So if you're writing off time that, maybe you post 3 hours to a job and you only bill 2, that's a loss, okay? If you quoted a customer 2 hours and your technician's really efficient, they get it done in 2.5, you're gonna have a gain, okay? So that's really trying to make this as simple as possible. So that's the generic definition. So the question is, so productivity, really what that measurement is, it measures a service manager's ability to manage those available technicians' hours and to maximize those hours on revenue producing jobs. So this is really a gauge on the performance of the service management, okay? So you've got a technician that comes in, I'll use an example. Technician comes in at 8 o'clock, they punch in, they go to the service manager and he says, oh, I haven't got anything lined up, go and sweep the floor and tidy up the tool room and I'll get you a job lined up, okay? Well, that's really not the technician's fault. That falls squarely on service management to say, no, you clocked in at 8, here's a job, clock right onto it. At 8:01, you're clicking away on a revenue producing job. So that's really what the nuts and bolts of this is. And the goal is to have 85% of those technicians' available hours on revenue producing jobs, okay? So how do we improve productivity, okay? So there's a number of ways and we'll just run through a few of them here. First of all, proactively book revenue work. So the example revenue work is customer, internal, and warranty. Those are the three main revenue producing jobs. Customer obviously is retail work. Internal is not tidying up the tool room. Internal is setup on new equipment for sale, reconditioning of used equipment that's increasing the value of a used piece or a new piece so it can be sold. And generally that's sold at retail price back to the service department or back to the sales department. And then of course, warranty, you're charging your manufacturer, so you're gonna get paid for that. So those are your three types. So number one, first of all, is make sure, because the bulk of this we want to be customer labor. We're going to talk about this in a second. So you really want to have a good marketing plan. So you're selling as many hours as possible on inspections or preventative maintenance programs, because you want the bulk of this to be coming from customer labor sales, okay? So you have to have a good marketing plan, and the service manager really needs to make sure you're driving that. Now, with your sales department, pre-booking of setup and trade reconditioning. So when the sales department knows there's a new piece coming, get that scheduled so that when a technician comes to work, bang, they're right on that setup or pre-delivery, or maybe there's a trade to say, all right, we've already got approval to recondition this trade, so that is there. And the same thing with warranty and product recall. I know years ago, a lot of service managers said, well, I don't really pre-book those. I just sort of use them as filler jobs. Well, that's not a bad philosophy, but you really want to make sure that you've got those scheduled so that if a technician's working on a customer job, for example, and maybe his parts don't arrive, they can transition as quickly as possible over onto maybe a warranty or a recall job without a delay. So it's having them pre-booked in the system, ready to go. And always make sure you've got your schedule and your jobs are assigned prior to the start of the day. So when the technician comes in, they don't have to wait 10, 15 minutes to be assigned. They clock in, they clock straight on a revenue job, okay? And this is another one, schedule secondary or backup revenue jobs so they can transition. So if they're done one job at 10 o'clock, they can, at 10:01, they can clock right onto another revenue job. Or if their parts didn't arrive or the customer, there's a delay for some reason, they're not standing around, they just say, okay, I'm gonna clock off that one and onto another revenue job, okay? And this is a good one, proactively monitor check progress throughout the day. So if a technician, for example, rather than waiting for the technician to walk up and say, hey, my parts didn't arrive, it's 3 o'clock, I got nothing to do, right? Well, maybe at noon you could have talked to that technician, or the technician could have said at lunchtime, hey, by the way, my parts didn't arrive, I'm probably going to be looking for something by 3 o'clock. Okay. Oh, good. Thanks for letting me know. I'll schedule something to keep you busy till 5, right? Rather than, because maybe at 3 o'clock when the technician walks up, he can't even find the service manager, right? So what does he do? Or what does she do? So proactively monitor those techs. And I call this make busy work. So these non-revenue jobs, you know, changing the oil in the boss's truck, or some of those jobs that you think, well, I just keep those to keep the technicians busy when we're slow. Obviously, your goal is to say, well, if I'm doing a good job of marketing, I won't have a slow time. So, and I'm going to contract out. They can take that to the GM or the Ford dealer or the local lube shop, and they'll change the oil in the boss's truck. I got to sell those technician hours. It's too expensive to have them changing the oil. And here's another big one. Don't allow your technicians to log on to non-revenue jobs. We've seen this in the past, especially with the old paper time cards. At the end of the day, they sit down and say, well, I'm just going to put an hour to training and I'm going to put an hour to shop cleaning and maintenance. No, really, that should be up to the service manager to say, I'm going to assign you to a certain job. You can't leave that to the technicians to say, just put those wasted hours anywhere you want. Okay, so don't allow them to do it. Only, that should only be the service manager's decision. Okay, now let's move into efficiency. So efficiency, we talked about productivity, really falls a lot on the service management. Efficiency really is a measurement of the technician. So it measures the percentage of the technician's revenue hours that have been billed out. Okay, and like I mentioned, this includes billing gains or losses, and you want to be 100% or better. Okay. So how do we improve efficiency? Well, obviously having great trained technicians is really important, and also making sure that technicians are matched to jobs they can succeed at. You're not going to have an apprentice on an engine overhaul job in their first month of work, right? But an experienced technician can easily tackle that job, especially if they've done it a number of times. So try and match them up, and your apprentices to say, all right, I've allowed 2 hours to do this job, and you know, you could easily, you're capable of it. Okay, so you want to make sure you're matched so they can do that. Obviously, we talked about training, retaining, and continual training to make sure that your technicians are always getting better. Segmented work orders is very common. However, I still work with dealerships that say we don't segment them out. We have a big job and everything goes onto one segment. And this is very hard to give estimates if every work order is different. Okay, you want to try and break it down. This is really moving towards a standard pricing or flat rate. And I'll use a quick example. I'm from the combine part of the world, so say for example, you got to replace the top feeder house shaft on a combine, right? And one technician says, well, I got to take the header off, I got to pull the feeder house off, I got to remove the belts, I got to take the chain off before I can get that. So removing the header might be a separate job, okay? Removing the feeder house might be a separate job, and replacing the top shaft might be a job. So if one technician writes it all together and says, oh, that's 6 hours to do all that, the other technician says, well, really, no, to do a feeder house top shaft is only 2 hours. Yeah, once I get to it, right? So that's really what we talk about, breaking them jobs down to that. and quoting and estimate as many jobs as possible. Now, again, here's another one that I believe is a real golden rule, is quote dollars, not hours. It's amazing to me how often I talk to service managers and they say, when a customer calls and they say, you know, what do you think it's going to be to do this specific repair? Well, a lot of service managers, you know, they've seen tons of these jobs before, and they'll say, well, you know, I think it's going to be 2.5, maybe 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever. What's the next question the customer's going to ask? What's your labor rate, right? Because the assumption is, well, if you're saying it's 2.5 hours to do that job, I'm assuming every technician in the world can do it at 2.5 hours. So I might as well shop around for who has the lowest hourly rate. So always quote dollars to the technician, convert it and say, you know, that job probably is going to run you between $450 and $500 based on what we've seen before, unless we run into some problems, right? Because that's really what the customer wants to know. However, the technician now needs to know, okay, so what should this take me? Okay, so the golden rule is give the customer a price, give the technician a time. You can say to the customer, hey, that's going to be $450 to make that repair. Now you can go to your technician and say, here's what needs to be done. Unless you run into a snag, this should take you about 2.5 to 3 hours. Okay, so you kind of have an idea of what that should take them. So that's a great golden rule to follow. Obviously, identify and control and eliminate causes for delays. And this might be at the parts counter. This might be technicians standing around visiting. It might be sales people coming in and talking to your technicians and interrupting them. It might be customers coming into the shop and visiting with technicians. That's a cause for delay and you can't bill that hour. Well, then you got to try and figure out a way to eliminate those causes for delays or work with your parts department, okay? And this is a big one. Hold regular technician training on proper work order documentation. This is probably the biggest leak that happens, is that you can't bill those hours because the documentation isn't there. So the service manager, maybe your warranty writer, they need the proper details of what did you do to make that repair so they can charge those hours. If there's no notes, it's pretty hard to justify to a customer why you spent $1,000 on this job. But if all the steps are listed, he's going to say, wow, he did a lot of stuff there, or she did a lot of stuff there. Yeah, I guess that's why it costs so much, right? So make sure your technicians understand how to document properly, okay? Now, we talked about earlier around labor sales mix, okay? So we talked about revenue, labor, sales, and this isn't really, every dealership's going to be slightly different depending if you're in large ag or if you're in the combine business or if you're in the turf business, but it's a good rule of thumb to even have a look at your dealership, and I'll explain in a second. So out of your revenue, labor, sales mix, okay, what percentage of it should be customer labor sales? Now I'm going to throw out a number of 65 to 75%. That might be a bit aggressive, okay, but I'll tell you what, if it's really, really low, you know, you may be missing some opportunities. So I'm going to say you want to have the bulk of it in customer labor sales, okay? So this is your labor sales divided by your total labor sales. Internal, 15 to 20%, and warranty, 10 to 15%. So this is kind of, again, a rule of thumb. Okay, so what percentage of those hours that I've got those technicians there, what is going into internal? And I'll use this example. If, say, for example, your dealership sells a really big run on a certain model, sales department sells a whole bunch of new balers or whatever it is, obviously your internal labor sales is going to go up because you had to do all those PDIs, maybe you had to do a lot of trade reconditioning, so you're going to have that go up a little bit. And then 12 months later, you could have a blip in warranty, right? That's going to happen, okay? But what you want to be careful of is having the shop rely too much on internal sales, because if all of a sudden the sales department runs into a slump, bad economy, doesn't rain, or we get flooding, and all of a sudden they don't sell any balers this year, you don't want to be standing around saying, wow, what are we going to do? Like, sales department, there's nothing to set up and pre-deliver. I'm kind of stuck here. And I'm, you know, I guess I'm going to challenge you to say, not if you've got a good marketing plan and you're bringing those machines in for inspection or preventative maintenance. You want to make sure you've got that pipeline full of customer work, okay? So this is a good run. a good rule of thumb. I'm not saying these percentages are bang on, but somewhere you can have a look at yours and set a target of where you want to be. And it's going to vary on your manufacturer, and it's going to jump up and down throughout the year. So finally, I just want to talk about teamwork from all departments. So to improve productivity and efficiency in your dealership, from the sales department, if they understand productivity and they understand efficiency, get them to promote your preventative maintenance programs or your service inspection programs. Have your sales department sell extended warranty, because that brings that customer work back into the shop, whether it's an extended warranty plan. And once that customer gets used to bringing it back to you, then that'll help drive your customer labor sales. And again, reduce delays. So get better instructions from your sales manager or your sales department regarding pre-delivery or trade reconditioning, so you're not running back and forth all the time to get further instructions. Okay, if you know that tractor needs duals and weights and a two-way radio installed and a GPS system installed, have that all on the work order so they're not running back and forth wasting time. Okay, now parts department can play a role, right? Now here's a good one. Just by driving productivity is, how often do you ask, hey, would you like us to install that part, Mr. Customer? Right? Because a lot of dealerships, and we talk about this, a lot of manufacturers have, they'll give a warranty on a part if it's sold over the counter for the replacement price of that part. However, if it's installed by a technician, sometimes actually the warranty period is longer, and it now covers parts and labor, right? So if you're selling it installed, that's better value for the customer. And he might say, wow, you mean the warranty doubles if you guys install it? Heck, I'm going to get you guys to do it rather than do it myself. And so that's going to drive customer labor sales, right? And then again, reduce that time for getting parts, like having technicians waiting for parts. Good rule of thumb is technician comes up, gives his list of what he's working on, and then says, okay, I'm going back to work. You gather up all these parts and wheel them back out to my bay. And then that way I can be more efficient rather than standing here. Because you know what happens when they stand there, they end up visiting, right? Now, service department, again, have a good marketing plan and really focus on your customer labor sales, because customer labor sales is cash. That's cash coming in. And we know that's so important to the dealership, okay? Have a labor budget so your technicians understand how many hours a year they need to sell, how many hours a month they need to sell, how many hours a week do they need to sell. Once they understand it, they'll quit wasting time, right? And for technicians, again, job planning, documentation, try to reduce that rework. And finally, reduce those time wasting activities. I worked with a dealership group not long ago, and the technicians sat down and said, if I could reduce 12 minutes a day, that's 50 hours a year. And then they took that times their shop rate. All of a sudden they're like, wow, per technician, that's $5,000 to $6,000 more revenue that's coming in just by me not wasting that little bit of time. So it's not like you're trying to climb a mountain. It's just helping the technicians understand and say, there's a few habits I have every day. I come in, I punch in, then I go and get a coffee. Maybe if I change that habit, I could pick up an extra 50, 75 hours a year. That's a big difference to a dealership, especially if you have 10, 20, 30 technicians, right? Okay, so I know there's been some questions coming in. Kim, maybe I'll turn it over to you and fire away. If there's some questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
All right, we do have some, and just a reminder to everyone, you can use that Q&A icon on the control panel to submit any questions you might have. So first up, can you talk about some ways you can generate revenue out of the shop foreman? What can they be doing?
That's a great question. So I'm going to assume you've got a service manager, maybe you've got 10 technicians, and then you have a shop foreman. So I'll use that as an example. So first of all, I would set a realistic target for that shop foreman to say, I expect you to bill 75% of your time, or 50% of your time, or 25% of your time. So yes, they're going to have some supervisory roles as a shop foreman, right? But where quite often it gets lost is a shop foreman quite often is highly skilled technically. So they'll go out and the technician might be having a problem with a certain job, or they might need assistance taking off a hood or splitting a tractor or whatever that may be, but they forget to clock onto that work order. So then what happens is that hour doesn't get billed. And this isn't easy, I understand it, but a shop foreman might say, well, I only intended to help them for 5 or 10 minutes, but it turned into 2 hours. Well, you know, if that is on that job, then that time should be billed to that job. So I would say set a target and set an expectation of how much of that percentage of that shop foreman's job, percentage of that shop foreman's time you want billed. Have that discussion with the shop foreman, and then look for ways to make sure you're picking that up. If you're trying to say, I expect you to bill at least 2 to 3 hours a day, we'll set the expectation and then go looking for ways to make sure that happens.
Okay, and then what should your work in progress run at a dealership that's at around that $75 million or under revenue?
Well, I'll break it down this way. In my opinion, some dealerships will say they want no more than 2.5 weeks of work carrying over. Some dealerships will say a full month. So here's how I would do that. If you, let's just say, for example, you have $100,000 worth of sales for the month, okay? You may want to have no more than 100,000 carry over into the next month. You're always going to have WIP carry over. You open up a work order on the 20th of the month, and it's not going to be done till the middle of the next month. Of course, that's going to carry over. So some people will say, you know, if I carry over a full month's worth of revenue or worth of WIP, that's good. I think more than a month is too much, in my opinion. But on average, if you take your total 12 months, you probably want to have, if you take your monthly service sales and then say, okay, what percentage of that do I want to carry over? 100% of that for the month, 50% of that? In my opinion, it should be somewhere under 100% carry over. Now, also, I want to caution, there's such a thing as good WIP. If you've got a job in the shop and you're still working on it, you're still charging hours, you're still putting parts on it, that's not bad WIP if it carries over into the next month. Bad WIP is when you open a work order and then you push it to the back of the bay, you spend 2 or 3, maybe 20 or 30 hours on it, then you don't work on it for another 2 months. That's bad WIP, okay? So I should clarify that a little bit, is identify what's bad and don't carry over any more than 100% of those sales. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and then what would you recommend as a last labor to invoice KPI in number of days?
Oh, that's a good question. So just to clarify that to everybody, so this is different than WIP. So WIP is when the work order is still open because you're still working on it. Labor to close is usually calculated by when's the last time that the technician posted time to that work order compared to when it got invoiced to the customer. So the technician's done the job and that work order is sitting somewhere. It's on the service manager's desk, it's on the administrator's desk, maybe it's still on the technician's toolbox. How many days does it take? I think for most large ag dealerships, I'm going to say 5 to 8 days, under 10 for sure. In small ag shops, if it's lawnmowers and stuff, you may even turn those over faster. You may be looking at 5 or less days. But on average, I'm going to say 5 to 8 days is a good target, and that would be my guess. I might be wrong, but I know dealerships that are doing it. And again, this has a big impact on cash flow because you've already paid the technician, you've already put the parts, the job is done, and you haven't invoiced the customer. So now the dealership is out the cash. You need that cash to pay the bills. So that's why those WIP and labor to close days are so important to monitor.
And then this person said they measure year-end average WIP to total sales at retail. Do you have a percentage that you feel is good for that?
I'm going to have to do a little bit of math. Actually, maybe I'll get you to, if you want to email, my email's up on the screen. Whoever asked that question, send me an email and I'll do my best to answer that question, because some dealerships calculate it on their rolling 12 sales. So they take rolling 12 sales months and then they take whatever their WIP is and they calculate that. Other dealerships say, we say, what is the dollars compared on that month's sales? So in some cases, you're going to have something like about 4%. I think for this person's answer, I'm going to say under 5%. Now, if you're doing it the other way and calculating based on how much did I carry over based on my total month sales, you could be 100% or 90% or 80%. That's why those two measurements are done differently. It depends how you calculate it. So if you want to send me an email directly, I'll try and I think I can answer your question if I understand it right. The way you're asking, if you're taking an annual whole year, I would say under 5%. If you're taking it by that month, I would say, 100% or less.
All right. And then our next question is, do you have a tech to staff ratio?
Yes, I do, but I don't know if I have it in front of me. Yeah, I'd have to go back and do some working again. Maybe by email's up there. Shoot me an email. I'll try my best to answer that question. I'm assuming you're looking at service management and service admin to staff, to number of technicians. So how many should you have? I don't know if I have a metric, but I might have some indicators based on some of the dealerships I work with that could give that number. So I'll do my, sorry, don't have that right in front of me without sort of going through my files, and I don't want to give the wrong information. So shoot me an email. I'll do my best to answer that. Okay, anything else?
Yes, one more just came in. So do you have any guidelines for productivity by tech calls, meaning A versus B versus C, etc.?
Okay, first of all, you're talking productivity or efficiency. A lot of dealerships can set it up. So I would say that if you've got somebody that's over 80%, they're probably an A tech, because you could put them on revenue jobs. You may want to set a guideline. I always hate to use those categories as A, B, and C, but it's a good rule of thumb. If you've got a technician that, you can have them on revenue jobs almost all the time, they're going to be in that, 80 to 85% productivity, and then their efficiency should be, 100% or higher. Okay, so again, I should ask that question. Again, productivity, the way I've described it, is really up to the service manager. Efficiency is the technician. So if you're going to gauge a technician, you kind of have to have both. But really, if you've got good revenue jobs, it's how efficient is the technician. And that's really what you should be gauging them on is, if they're assigned a 4-hour job, can they do it in 4 hours or less? Okay. Or do they write the right documentation so you can bill all 4 of those hours, right?
I think you answered his question, but he did write in with another way to look at it is, should an A tech be greater than 85%? And he did clarify he was talking productivity, not efficiency.
Yeah, productivity. When you really think about it, like it's tough to get, it's tough to get much higher when you have productivity, because you will have days where they show up to work and then they're full day training. So you can't really penalize that technician for that, right? So that's why efficiency and productivity is different. And so 85%, you want to make sure you say, well, I'm going to take from 1,900 hours to 1,615 in my example. I'm basically accepting the fact that there are going to be some delays. There's going to be training. They're going to take breaks. There's going to be things that just happen. And that's realistic, right? But it's, it's trying to recover those once they are on that revenue job, if that explains it, right? You can't be over 100% in productivity, because you can only post so many hours to a job, and that shows up in efficiency, really around charge out efficiency. two different metrics.
Okay, we have time probably for one more question if there was anything else. Otherwise, we've answered everything that's come in so far.
There was a question, I think, if I just scroll back, they were asking about that slide where I was saying the expenses, $55 expenses per hour. That has nothing to do with the technician, okay? Those, like you're, again, going back to it, in my example, I was saying your labor rate was 120. So you can put in whatever your labor rate is. My example was 120. You're paying the technician $30. That's their compensation, okay? So that's your cost of sale because that's tied directly to that technician. That gives you gross margin dollars. The expenses have nothing to do with that technician's wages. The expenses are the heat, the light, the taxes, yes, your administrative wages, your service managers or shop foreman, a percentage of those wages. That's what it takes to keep that shop. And I broke it into a dollar or into an hourly just by saying, okay, if it costs whatever it is, $200,000 to keep this shop running for the year, I divide that by how many hours we're open. That's really all I was doing there, just to give you an idea of what it costs per hour to keep the shop open. It'd surprise you, actually. Their shops are expensive. There's a lot going on.
All right, and then we did have two more questions came through.
Okay.
Do most dealers have techs punch out for, legislative breaks, like so for taking a coffee break and things like that?
That's a tough one. I would say, in my experience, generally no. They remain on that whatever work order they're on if they're taking a 15-minute break.
Okay,
Yeah.
And then what percentage of the dealers you work with bill overtime labor rate when they're paying a tech overtime?
I don't have that. I don't have that answer. I do know, because I work in other countries, not just Canada and the US, I know some places they actually they have a higher rate for after hours, but only if it's emergency. So they might say, look, we have extended hours through planting or extended hours through harvest. But if it's a non-urgent job, if a customer says, yeah, can you send a guy out on Sunday to do a service on my tractor? You might sort of leave that opportunity open to say to the customer, hey, I have to pay double time to get him to come out. I'm going to need to charge you a little extra for that. And the customer might say, oh, fine, just leave it, have him come out Monday morning. Or they might say, I don't care. Like, I want them now. I'll pay a little extra to get them out. So I think you want to have some discretion. We're in the industry where, harvest time, planting time, haying time, depending on your dealership, you've already got extended hours. But I do know some dealerships do charge a premium, but it's usually discretionary because you want to have some flexibility to the customer. I don't know if that answers that question, but
All right, and then this will be our last question. Do most dealers charge out for computer hookup time, specialty tools, things like that?
It's starting to get more and more prevalent. So because, connecting to first of all, sometimes they just charge a flat rate because that shows value to a customer. I mean, you think about it in the old days, if we had a tractor wasn't running right, sometimes we'd start replacing injectors and fuel pumps and all sorts of stuff to solve it. Now we plug the laptop in and it might say, hey, this points us right to injector number 5. And that could be a huge saving to that customer. So by saying, we charge a flat $50 to hook up to a computer for diagnostics, because these computers are expensive, I think it's very reasonable. Where it's going to get more important is we're going to start to do more and more of it remotely, where you can actually connect right to that tractor from your dealership, from your laptop. And that's saving the customer a tremendous amount of travel time, a technician coming out to see the machine, if you can do diagnostics from the laptop. And that's huge value to the customer. I think a minimal a charge is more than reasonable. Let's face it, you've made the investment. You could save that customer thousands of dollars in service calls by doing it remotely, and they'll pay for it. Not that customers don't complain. We always complain when we have to pay for something, but yes, I think it's something you should be looking at. Those are essential tools now, and you should be recovering that.
All right, that's great. That is all the time we have today. The presentation and audio will be available up on the Farm Equipment website in case you want to go back and review it or have anyone else at your dealership watch it as well. Keep an eye on your Farm Equipment or on your email for the Farm Equipment newsletter for more information on that. On behalf of Kelly, the Western Equipment Dealers Association, and the Farm Equipment staff, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. When you leave the webinar, you'll be directed to a short survey. Please let us know what you thought of the event and if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thanks everyone.